it's Nicole. I'm excited to talk to the grave gardeners about pruning roses. March is the perfect time to prune roses. Some people say that when the forsythia blooms is a good time to prune. I think you can really do it anytime beginning mid to late February into mid-March. So for most pruning, just a simple pair of bypass pruners is going to be great. Sometimes I will use a pair of loppers, also bypass loppers, for if I really have a thick cane that I'm trying to get through at the base. So there are so many different kinds of roses, more than 20. But what we'll talk about now is just China roses and shrub roses, both of which repeat bloom. If you have a rose that only blooms one time and blooms in the spring, don't actually prune it in March. Prune it after it blooms if you need to, because otherwise you're cutting all that growth off, which is what would give you the flowers. So if you want to try to figure out what rose you have and it's not in bloom, here are a few ways that you can, clues that you can get. So if you have a rose that has very kind of twiggy, bendable, lax growth, green stems that don't have a lot of thorns on them, and still maybe has some persistent foliage, and just thin, twiggy, delicate, wispy canes here, this is likely a China rose. You really don't even need to prune this. It prefers not to be pruned. So if your rose looks like this, just leave it. One thing that's always true with roses is that you favor new wood over old wood. So here's a new cane coming out from the base of the plant, and here's a really old cane. If I wanted to thin this rose out, I would remove the old and leave this nice new cane. So if you're pruning, you don't want to shorten the new canes. If you can, it's better to do that to the old. Westerland. It's a shrub rose. I've had it for a while, so it's big. You can see that this cane is just broken off. This is old and dead, but there are a number of new things that are coming out. I really want to shorten this type of rose to about knee high. It will grow this much in one season. So as you can see here, this is one of the little buds. This is where new growth will come out. It's a little swollen area. Here's a bud that's already starting to break. You want to prune directly above a bud eye at an angle where it's going away from the bud. And you want to prune so that outward facing buds are just below the cut, because the new growth will go outwards from the center of the plant instead of inwards, which is less pretty, and it will have less circulation if you have a lot of inward growth. So that was my first cut, and then what I'll do is just look selectively for other places that I want to cut so that I'm creating an open shape. You can always go further down too. And I'm always going to be looking for that outward facing bud. And just one other thing to keep in mind is that new growth will, if a cane is less than the thickness of a pencil, it will never get that much bigger. So these tiny things you just want to cut off. Okay, so this one's ready to go. It is done. It'll put on probably 3 times as much growth in one season, especially if it is fertilized monthly from April to August. I just use dehydrated chicken manure. And don't be afraid to be too rough with these. Most of these garden roses, these shrub roses, respond really well to pretty heavy pruning. And one last thing, if you notice a rose that's coming up from the soil or right underneath where the grafting union would be, you're going to want to cut this off or maybe even pull it off, because this is actually a rose of the rootstock, not of the variety that you purchased.